Okay, it's 5 p.m. and I'd like to call the PAC meeting in 20 months in person and open to the public. It's been 20 months since we last met, and the last meeting was our review of the GSP. And today we're going to be focused primarily on the administrivia and restarting and re-establishing all the rules and how we operate and who the members are, so that we can get prioritize the things that will be on our schedule next month and in the future beyond that, and then be set to take off and run. So with that, would everybody stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? To our flag and to the republic which it represents. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I would ask everybody to remain standing for, this is a little change for us, but in view of what has happened this week and today in particular, I'd like to take a moment of silence or prayer, your silent prayer, for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have lost their lives, their families, and all who remain in current danger. Thank you. Okay, we'll begin first with a roll call. And one of the things we're trying to determine at this first meeting is who are the remaining active PAC members. We have been actively contributing via email and document review, independently submitted comments, but we have not been collaborating per the Brown Act. So we have 10 known or 10 last known current members. Not before order. I'll do the public comment after the call. Is it in the other order? Did I do it out of order? Okay. My mistake. I drafted that agenda and I messed it up. Okay. With that, we'll take open public comment on items within our purview, but not on the agenda today. Do we have any public comment from the audience? Do we have any? I don't see any, Gary, from the public in electronic land. Thank you. With that, we'll go back to the calling the roll. And thanks, Don, for keeping me straight. It's good to see you, too. And it is truly good to see some faces that I haven't seen since this started in a long time. And I'm happy to see that we're all here after what we've gone through the last 20 months. So, Ed Imsand. Pat Quist. Dave Janis, obviously here. Renee. Here. Nick Panzer. Here. West Katzenstein. Lyle Fisher. Here. Judy Decker. Here. Camille Anderson notified me she was out of town, wouldn't be able to attend this meeting, but she's still active. Tim Carroll. Tom Bukowskis also notified me that he'll be on a 4-month detail, and he will have a designee that the BLM appoints to fill his slot for that 4 months. But at this meeting, specifically, he is at the French Fire. And so think about him and the safety of the folks up there, too. So he is still active with the group. John Kersey? Here. And Lorelei?
Here.
All right. Hey, it's good to see you, even if it's only virtual.
I'm here, too.
It's good to see everyone. Thank you.
And Don Zadiba. I skipped over you. Thank you, Don. It's not fair you have on the roster list. Okay, so we've confirmed what we needed to know. The one we will meet, April and I will need to confirm is Tim Carroll. And then when we get to it, we'll go through this again when we get to it on the agenda, confirming the membership and operations. Okay. And we are there. Item 4A, we're confirming the current roster representative attached, and we have done all of that and confirming we do not have one large agriculture rep, and we do not have a business interest reps. We have positions on this committee for 12 individuals before the last GA meeting. That was the prescribed number for the committee, and 4 advisory positions ad hoc. And in this case, we have the 2 open, and 1 is being added. So we note that the Trona community rep will be added for our future meetings, and all meetings of the PAC, or all appointments to the PAC, come from applications that are sent to the GA board, and the board selects the designee for that particular interest. That is for the Policy Advisory Committee members. They did not have a specific policy yet for the Trona community member, but we were suggesting, and we believe they've accepted the recommendation, that it come through Director Itmeyer, who is the Trona and San Bernardino community representative. So we will see if there's a nominee that comes before the board at the next GA, and we may have a new member by the next meeting of the PAC that sits with us on the board, or on the committee. So I've already gotten to B. New replacement candidate nominations must be requested from the GA board and approved by it. That's with regards to the GA. Are there any public comment on the what we've talked about on this item, number 5 or number 4? None seen from the floor. None seen from the electronic audience.
Mr. Chair, this is Keith Lemieux chiming in. I don't have a comment on that, but I just wanted to let you know that I was able to get in the meeting, and I'm currently present and watching.
Oh, thank you. Keith, do you want to elaborate on what I said about the Trona community rep and suggesting that nominations or applications go to Director Itmeyer?
That's correct. I didn't actually hear you. I just got in, but it is correct that Director Itmeyer is receiving applications, and he's going to be responsible for making a nomination to the GA board later. So if people are interested in that, please reach out to him, and I'm sure April can provide contact information for folks that want to reach out.
Thank you. And do we expect that nomination to be made to the full board at the next GA meeting in 2 weeks?
I don't think that's probably enough time to accomplish that, but I know he's working on it now, so we'll see. It's not currently set for the agenda for that meeting. Okay.
Obviously, we'll react as to what happens at that meeting, but thank you very much. It's good to know for the community. Okay, next item, number 5, confirm the PAC chair and vice chair and assign note taker. We'll start with the PAC chair. I have remained active throughout this, and I'm pleased with your concurrence to continue to serve in that position, unless there's any nominations from the floor. And let me preface shortstop that conversation by saying something I should have said under the previous agenda. You all should have noted in our bylaws and in the discussions preceding getting up to this, ready for this meeting, and it's listed on the bottom of the enclosure with the membership. You'll see a little note reminding folks that we are appointed, the current PAC members are appointed through the GSP acceptance by the DWR. And after the DWR accepts the GSP, then service for each position that we represent is a 2-year term from that point on, since the GSP has not yet been formally accepted by DWR. In fact, our terms remain open and our seats occupied, but the positions are established through that timeline. Then we'll have the opportunity to review and perhaps consider vacancies, et cetera, for 2-year terms in each of our slots from that point on. Keith, did I say that properly?
You did. Those of us who drafted that document didn't contemplate this prolonged interregnum between submitting the report and getting a response, but that will end in January.
Yeah, hopefully, I think that's when they have a deadline. The requirement is that they answer by then, right?
That's correct. And in talking to them, they're very aware of the deadline, and they say they've got a certain order they're doing them in, and so we'll expect to hear something by then.
Thank you. Okay, that takes care of the chair. Vice Chair, Pat, do you wish to continue?
I would continue.
Is there any objection to that or nominees for Vice Chair?
I ask that both the chair and the vice chair stay on as currently.
Okay, it looks like Pat and I, having been reconfirmed, I don't think we need a vote to do that because we're still serving existing terms. If there's no challenge to that and we don't desire to step down, then we continue. The third item under this one is assign a note taker, and we've had some difficulty with that. Josh was our last one responsible for the minutes. As you all know, we have responsibility for that the chair has to report, to draw up a written report from each meeting and present it at the next GA board meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
believe that with Josh's absence, Renee Westerlust took over that position.
We have had no minutes since a while back. She hadn't done that. So we're getting to where we need to go, I think, here. What we had, Josh and I had agreed on that my report would serve as the body of the minutes with identification of the key decisions and votes, which are the only thing we're absolutely required in minutes are the recording of the actions and the votes of the members in recording those actions. So with that addition to my reports and the video, the fact that we are now video cast, when the bylaws were drawn up, there were no video casts and video recordings. So I indicated our preference to the board 2 weeks ago was that my report and documentation of the actions together with the video recording stand as sufficient for the minutes. If that's acceptable to everyone, and let me ask first for an input from Keith. From a legal sense, is that acceptable?
I apologize. I was texting with the general manager who's having trouble getting onto the WebEx. Is your question what needs to be in the minutes?
No, well, sort of. I'm as I suggested during the GA board itself meeting. I usually submit a report that is required by the bylaws of the GA meeting, and that report could be beefed up slightly to include documentation of all actions taken and the votes and each committee members voting. That would serve as the minutes, especially as augmented by the video recording capability and archiving that we did not have when the bylaws were originally drawn up.
Yeah, so, technically the minutes, the minutes and the report sort of are two different things, but I guess if the question is, can we make them one thing? Yes, certainly. you could do it that way. As you know, the minutes simply have to record the action taken. They don't have to necessarily go into detail about what was said on every topic by whom, although sometimes people keep minutes that way. Obviously, the primary value of the PAC is the comments, right? That's what we want to hear, and that's what the board wants to hear. So it would be good if we could figure a way to get those comments in a way that could get in front of the board. But you guys also do have the ability, if I recall correctly, to submit sort of a written report on topics too. So maybe if you left the more prosaic things to the minutes and simply record the voting, and then save the more detailed reports for the important topics, that would make sense to me.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Just a minute. Clarification, Keith. What I was proposing was we have a fairly good documentation in the report, which is actually required by the bylaws. The chair is required to report and has provided a written one historically to the board, and together with the actions recorded, that could suffice for the minutes when confirmed by the committee the following month. So the report would happen in report format before the GA board, and the minutes would be documented with the votes and decisions and confirmed and approved by the entire committee at the very next meeting. That's what I was proposing, and I'd like a response on that, and then we can open it up for committee discussion.
Yeah, I agree that would satisfy your requirements.
Okay.
We are a committee, and I think I just heard Mr. Lemieux say that the board is interested in comments. And so I would suggest that both in your report and in the minutes, the comments made by the committee members and by the public be included. In the case of the public, for instance, the meeting that we had a couple of months ago where all those people came to the board meeting, I think you could summarize that. But I think that comments are sometimes forgotten. And so if you put them in the minutes in your report, they'll be there for us to refer to, both as individual committee members and as a whole committee.
I agree with you, Judy, and if you go back and look at my reports, they were probably almost near verbatim in order to capture, as we were getting to the very emotional level and final approval of GSP, they were quite lengthy in capturing those. And I intend not to perhaps continue that lengthy ones, but as you said, summarize and make sure that the report should consider the comments.
Not mine.
Mr. Chair, can I say something?
Yes.
I am delighted that the shoe's on the other foot all of a sudden, and I'm about to tell Member Decker something that she's told me many times, which is the microphone is not very sensitive. And
okay. How's that?
Yeah, you have to speak right, as I've learned up there, you have to speak right into it. So I didn't actually hear about half of what you were saying.
What I said was that oftentimes the committee members and the public will make comments that are important, and I think they should be recorded in both the minutes and the report for future referrals so that they aren't forgotten, because some of them are things that perhaps should be acted upon in the future. And in the case of the board meeting we had a couple of months ago, where all those people were there complaining about the cost of their water, those comments, something like that could be summarized. But in the case of the board, of the committee, and other members of the public who might have something, who would have something of importance to remember, I think they should be recorded, is what I said. Did you hear that?
I did. Thank you. I heard that very clearly.
Judy, if you're suggesting that I record the minutes for the Groundwater Authority meetings,
No,
I'm not volunteering.
I'm not volunteering you.
I'm kidding. Okay. I had questions about these microphones too. For everybody's edification, I talked to Gary back here, who obviously installed these and is most familiar with them. They aren't as insensitive as they appear to be. They are directional, straight out of the microphone. If you look on, if you take the cover off, which I wouldn't advise you to do because it's probably going to help tear it, but they are flat face to you. They are not round microphones or oval microphones. They are directional, and if you speak into it, you actually don't have to be that close, and it's still going to pick up your voice. When you turn your head or you move slightly, it doesn't pick it up. The second thing, because they are directional, some of us had a habit when we weren't talking and we were getting feedback, we would put the mic down, or some put the mic up. When you put the mic up, it picks up and amplifies all the sound in the room coming from the acoustics and raises the gain level so that it makes them have sensitivity issues. So the key is be mindful of talking directly into the mic. And you don't have to talk that loud or be that close in order for that to work. I'm sorry, Pat. Okay, so with that, what I would suggest is, from my experience in the last couple of years doing those notes and the PAC reports, real time up here, it would be very helpful to me if I still had a note taker that would call the roll vote where we do that, but annotate what the results of the votes are when we do that. So I would ask, and then I can use that to augment what I'm writing and then reviewing on the audio and visual in writing the report for the GA. And I would like a volunteer to record the actions for the meeting and then get them to me for the report. And then everything will come back to this committee, obviously, for final approval of the minutes at the next meeting. So do we have a volunteer to record the actions of the meeting and forward them to me?
I would volunteer, except I have arthritis in my fingers, and I just can't write very fast anymore.
That's I've got the same thing, but okay. All right, well, then I will just try to do it myself, and we will have the videos that I will be able to use if I fall behind on it. Any other comments from the public on this item, the note taker?
I have a question. Maybe through you can ask Keith Lemieux, is it necessary that we actually have minutes because all these meetings are being recorded now?
Yeah, and Keith, Renee asked if it was necessary to have minutes at all since things are being recorded now, and that is a good question because the bylaws as written still require it, but the bylaws were written before the video recordings. So is there a need or legality to have anything other than a video recording for this?
Yeah, there is. You do need to adopt minutes, but they can be very simple, and they can be kind of like a form you fill out. It's the easiest way to do it. In other words, you can have a form that just has the normal things, the sort of ordinary process stuff that you have on the agenda, like approving the minutes from the previous meeting and whatever other routine matters are on there, that's all filled out with blanks, and you just write in moved by so-and-so, seconded by so-and-so, and record the vote underneath it. And then, staff, somebody from RGS can help convert that into minutes for you. And it doesn't have to be a big project.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can have somebody from RGS give you an example of that to use, and perhaps at your next meeting.
Yeah, that would simplify it for me, trying to keep notes on the important things, as well as then subsequently using the video recording to put together our report. Thank you.
Can't you use the time code stamps that's on the video to identify where something is said, or et cetera, thinning out the need for minutes? Because I was going to ask the same question Renee did. He was in the same. Wait a minute, you got this video. Why do you need detailed minutes, even though the bylaws say so? Maybe we need to change the bylaws.
Well, the bylaws, Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood that was one of the Brown Act requirements is minutes.
Yeah, you guys are a public meeting, and there's a requirement to have minutes. It doesn't say what has to be in those minutes, but you need to have minutes. So we can do some very simple, stripped down, basic minutes that will be easy to accomplish. And let me just caution that I've only got an availability until 6 p.m. So I just want to let you know I'll have to drop off in a half hour.
Okay, thanks. I think we'll get through the things that we absolutely needed from you pretty quick.
Okay.
And so, and consistent with that, not inconsistent with that, my thought had been we have to do a report anyway. If we simply add the form of when note and document the decisions in that same report and eliminate a second thing that we were calling minutes, we've got it all captured in one document. The Brown Act is happy, and the administrative load is less. So any other public comment on that?
Well, I just want to get it clear. Did Mr. Lemieux say he was going to provide us with a RGS form just to fill out the minute requirements?
That's what he said. He was going to ask Carol to provide that, the general manager.
Okay.
Yeah, I can assist Carol with that. Was that Renee speaking? I didn't quite.
Yes.
She turned her head. Oh, hi, Renee. I didn't quite hear you, but yeah, I can work with Carol on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Keith, the interesting thing about these microphones is they helped solve some of the feedback problem that we experienced in this chamber before, but the committees where we have a natural human tendency to look at who we're speaking at, our movements, our normal movements take us away from the directionality. So we just have to kind of retrain ourselves to look without changing our position to the mic.
Well, since we're sort of reversed roles on opposite sides of the mic tonight, I guess it's giving us all more empathy for the situation, right?
Yep. Well, I've watched this with City Council, the GA, and the new system, and I asked Gary to help me with, hey, how do we get this thing to work right? And he was very helpful in this, and I think we'll get used to it. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll move on to the next item. Confirm the schedule for standing regular meetings that we all submitted to, and the most optimum for the maximum amount of people was this Thursday evening, 5 to 8 p.m. time slot, Thursday of the month. Is there any reason that we, and with video transmission, video recording, and WebEx call-in for staff and members of the committee if absolutely necessary. Is there any reason or committee member that desires to change that? Okay, it looks like we have confirmed that. I don't believe we need a vote on that. Any public comment? In person or in the Ethernet? None being seen. This is one of the topics we probably needed you for, Keith, was the open TAC member seats. And I've had a number of questions from members, and I think April has also, about why is this on the TAC agenda. And I would refer you to the bylaws, which suggest that each PAC member has the ability to nominate a TAC member that represents the seat which they, their representative group that they represent. And that's why that's in here. We are currently, this is more of a notification of a need that we will have to take care of at the next, at upcoming meetings. We currently, Steve Johnson, the Water Resource Manager, who has the primary interface with the TAC, is soliciting the active membership about what seats remain filled and what don't. And we will have a list at the next meeting, hopefully, of the TAC members, like we had for the PAC members at this meeting, and a list of the open seats, and we'll take this forward from there with our ability to nominate them. But there are requirements that I would point out, requirements listed. They should be representing the stakeholder group that you as a PAC member represent, and they should be members of the TAC must have a formal education and experience in a groundwater-related field. So that's been taken usually as a technical degree and experience in a groundwater-related field. So it's a degree and experience and an understanding of the technical aspects of the basin or similar groundwater basins in California. So when we identify the active status of TAC membership at the next meeting, we'll get that out ahead of time and then be soliciting for nominations, which will go from individual members, should you have one, to the board for notification and their approval. So that's what this agenda item is about. Did I misstate anything, Keith?
That sounds exactly correct.
Thank you. Any member comments?
No. We do have a person, the RCD does have a person in mind. Unfortunately, he's been off and on quite ill, and I have asked him again, so we'll see what happens in the ensuing month. Okay. And he fits all of the requirements.
Thank you, Judy. Nick?
Yes, I've been aware of this opportunity since I've been a member of the committee, but I'm uncertain how to take advantage of it. I don't know any hydrologists personally that meet the criteria, but I would like to be able to appoint one. And I don't know if Mr. Zadiba here can help me, or anybody up here who knows a hydrologist that is in the general community that's not otherwise engaged, but I would like to have that kind of resource personally for Renee and I. So, but we do need help. I wouldn't even know where to start with that. So for whatever that's worth. Thank you.
Don, could you help with that?
Tap it. Tap it lightly. Tap it lightly. Multiple times. Tap it lightly.
I had the same problem at the GA meeting.
Oh, it just came on. Okay.
Yeah.
Gary turned it on.
I don't have anybody I can recommend at this time. They probably have to be somebody relatively local. Let me think about it. I don't have any response at this time, though.
Okay. And just a minor correction to one thing you said, Nick, you nominate them and then the board appoints them.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. Any other member comments? Public comments?
Actually, Dave, the Navy does already have their representative for the TAC established, so that'll be Charlotte Baldwin.
Okay. And that will be, I think they were aware of that. The issue is some of the ones that stopped inputting during the 20-month hiatus here. We do have some very active TAC members and some not so active. So that's the challenge that we have, and we can maybe discuss if we think about this and other people have creative ideas on how to identify hydrogeologists, geologists. There's any number of folks that have a technical background and applied experience in that area that may be helpful to the community. So seeing no more public comment, we'll move on to the next item. Future agenda items, and there were 5 on this list that we were asked to prioritize. The first 3 are existing existing documents or documents in draft that which is consistent with what we did over the last couple of years in getting ready for the GSP, in reviewing drafts and various policy documents, et cetera, that involve the implementation planning for the GSP. The last 2 items were being asked to, and I greatly welcome this, we're asking to play a more proactive role in the future. And I'm very pleased that the GA is asking us that to give them recommendations up front on 2 different issues that are specified here in advance of formal drafting of a document, which we will then review for policy. So this is something right in the wheelhouse of what we desired to be doing all along, and the GA has the intent to utilize that. So what I would suggest is we prioritize first among the 3, secondly among those 2, and has Carol been able to get on?
I'm here, yeah.
Carol, what I would like from you and Keith is if you can tell me of those 5 items, what's the time needs, which alligators are closest to the bus that we need to review or do proactive input on. My thoughts right off the bat would be that the public communication update plan is probably number 1 because that exists, and we have talked about the need to do that, and that would be the obvious number 1. But I didn't know what the deadlines or prioritization from within the staff of items B through E are, and perhaps you could help us with that.
I am going to have to, I don't have the document in front of me right now, Dave. I'm just participating by phone, but I do think that the outreach plan is the top priority. We've heard a lot of comments from folks asking us to revisit it and review it. But I'm going to actually see if Keith has some thoughts on the other items while I pull them up, okay?
Thank you. Keith?
Well, listen, I think that you guys could get at those in any order you want to, in my view. We would like to move forward on all of them, but we didn't present you with any particular suggested order on purpose. It's really up for you guys to decide.
Okay.
You can consider that the first policy question for the night.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have some comments. Would you like them
Yes.
now? Oh, I hope you can hear me, Keith and Carol, and whoever else might be there. I've been thinking a lot about the meetings, and as most of you know, I and Don have attended, I believe, every GA meeting since its inception. And I remember when the whole affair first started, and we met over there in the motel meeting room, that things were a little less formal, and there was more interaction with the public. And for those of you who have either listened in or come to the meetings, it's obvious, or have talked to people out in town, there are many people that don't quite know what's going on. And so I was thinking that perhaps our committee, as a policy advisory committee, could, still there, Keith, right? Loosen our meeting up to be less formal and to have more interactions with the public that might call in or come. And we would not give them information like the water's dropped 5 feet in the well on XYZ Street. We would instead steer them to a place where they could get the information that they might need. Not everyone has a computer. Not everyone that has a computer has internet. Not everyone has a smartphone. And so there are people out there that perhaps are well owners on a mutual or just ratepayers with the water district who I think need some interaction. There's a lot of hard feelings out there about the GA, especially, and the water district, especially since it's now apparent on their bill. And this is not something for us to decide tonight, unless you want to. I think it's something for us to think about interaction with those stakeholders. I remember at one of those first meetings, there was a lot of talk from the board, from Steve Johnson, from the facilitator that was there, that this whole affair was for us, for the stakeholders. And so I'd like you to think about that a lot. The other thing I think we should have on this list is a poem. When the GA first started, they had quite a nice poem, and at the commander's insistence, actually, and it has disappeared. And the poem we could help develop it. We could take these policies and put them on it. We could put the TAC recommendations on it and the board recommendations, and they would be able to follow the ideas that are put on there, the tasks that need to be done, who's going to do the tasks, and how much is it going to cost, and in what order it should be done. For myself and others who have watched the meeting, we feel that the GA board is, I'm not sure they're clear where they are going. As a member of the public sitting at that, out there in the audience, I'm not sure where they're going. But they're spending money, and the money is tax dollars. And so I believe strongly that we need to urge the board to reactivate a poem. And the third thing I had, I did that. I would like to see one of the first things that we do is to invite Stetson engineers, perhaps whoever is in charge, to come and give the PAC a detailed report on the GSP. Where is it? What has happened to it? Are there sections of it that were found to be unsatisfactory that need to be redone or partially redone? Can we help do that for them as we did when we reviewed and made suggestions over sections of the GSP when it was being written? I think it's very important to have that so that we know where we are. And I would like those 3 things added to your number 8.
Okay, we can talk about those as future items, although the poem is not, I don't believe, is relevant to this committee as a policy. When you phrased it, urge them to adopt a program or a poem, we can in fact do that, but we don't propose a poem.
Well, but perhaps our report to them should strongly urge them to create and adopt one. The one they had in the beginning that they used, they marched right along on it, and everything was focused. And to me, it's not focused anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you, Judy. However, that they had a focused target, well defined, as to what had to be in the GSP.
Well,
and they've got a lot of. Now we have multiple litigations and multiple timelines, but I believe it wouldn't be the same. From my management experience, it wouldn't be the same type of type of poem. But I agree with you that a poem or sub-tiers of a poem on the individual actions that are proceeding would be very helpful.
I think the person that would be most helpful to, or rather the organization, is Stetson Engineers. For instance, they have created a well management plan several times. For instance, you have on the list, there's emergency water, whatever it's going to be, policy. The water district just adopted an emergency water contingency plan that is excellent. It spells out things for customers in the water district, right down to what they should do and what the water district is going to do. The GA cannot go out and tell a well owner, whether it's Mr. M. Sand or Mr. Katzenstein, to shut off their well. If I'm correct, the only entity that can do that is the Department of Water, the Lahontan Water Quality Control District.
Keith, do you have a general comment on this, on Judy's inputs?
I didn't quite hear the question. Did you ask me if I had a comment?
No. Judy recommended adding 3 items to our future agenda items. Discussion on a more relaxed format that we might be able to do, realizing that we still have Brown Act requirements. A poem, and then that was the second one, that a poem or sub-poems that the GA adopts so we can see where they're going. And for example, along those lines, the fact that we don't have one publicly visible, it led to my initially questioning Carol and yourself about what is the need and urgency for these 5 items so that we can tackle what needs to be done first. That was number 2. Number 3 was to report on the status of where the GSP was and what items specifically, and what items.
Mr. Chair, just for clarity, I did hear everything Judy said. I just didn't hear whether you were asking me a question about it.
Yeah, I was asking you if you had any input with regards to applicability and what we could, applicability for this group or not.
So those are all I would consider those all policy questions. And it's not for me, I don't think, to opine on them. That's what you guys are for as far as the merits of them are concerned. But those are certainly things that you could add to your agenda for discussion. I will say that regarding the scheduling question, now that we have adopted, we're in this weird period where we've adopted the GSP, but we haven't gotten approved yet. There is no current intention to revise any part of the GSP. However, part of the GSP is periodically revising it after it's been approved. So presumably, once it gets approved in January, every 5 years we're supposed to examine it and update it. And the PAC will have a role in that. As far as the schedule moving forward, the schedule moving forward is really the schedule of the GSP, right? The GSP sets targets and they're very broadly defined currently, but it sets generally targets to meet. So that's one form of schedule that we have that we're moving forward on currently. The other issue, I guess, is you were mentioning the timing of these particular items and how do we know what the scheduling of these items are. Staff maintains sort of an ongoing action item list, and so we're constantly sort of getting things to the point where they're suitable to go on the agenda, and then they go on the agenda. And so we have that kind of schedule that we're maintaining. Certainly, I think it would certainly be possible to, and probably desirable, to share that kind of scheduling information with the PAC. Now that you guys are up and running, that would help clarify some things, and we could certainly work with Carol on that. I don't know if that even needs further discussion. I appreciate that you guys need to know what the scheduling, our intended schedule of items are going forward, and we can do a better job communicating that, I think. And then, as you point out, there are decisions that are being made that are in response to things that Judge Nakamura is doing. And so there's a certain amount of fluidity, obviously, in the schedule, too. What else? Oh, you asked about having a less formal structure for your meetings. There's kind of a form of public meeting that the PAC has had in the past. I think Member Decker made a reference to it, which is sort of a workshop style format. Yeah, and that topic is good when you want to discuss particular issues. It's appropriate to be a little less formal and try to get more feedback and encourage more participation. That's certainly something you guys could adopt. I would recommend that you use it. Maybe every meeting has a workshop in it, right, on one of these topics or something. And if you want to invite the public to engage more and have more back and forth, that's fine, as long as it's on the agenda and people are talking about agenda items, how you want to control the meetings up to the chair. And again, I don't know that even, again, if you guys agree you want to do, workshops on items and it's understood that that's how the meeting's going to be conducted, you don't really need the GA's permission for that, and it's just something for you guys to decide. What was the last topic?
That was more or less it. But I have some questions for you, Keith.
Sure.
I brought up the GSP and a review of it, where it was, and if there were areas that perhaps needed more information, needed to be fixed for this reason. There are several things that have been brought up in the last year or so that were brought up before, were discussed by PAC, by TAC, and Stetson has brought them up again. One of them is the shallow well mitigation plan, which I presented to you my comments on that at the last GA board meeting. I'm concerned, and I think perhaps others are too, that we keep repeating some of these things for no obvious reason. And there's a limited amount of tax dollars that are going to this program, and there are lots of things they can be used for. So that was one issue. And the issue of a more relaxed meeting, you were here, you got the flack from the people who were very angry, who got up and talked about the GEA board and their water rates and all that. And you know, as well as all the rest of us know, that little black thing that Don Zadiba has right over there by his left hand has something on it called social media. And social media is the modern version of the 10-party telephone line of days of old. If you want to spread gossip fast, that's a way to do it. And I think a lot of misinformation has been spread in this valley about the GA, the water supply situation, and all the rules and regulations. And I think it's past time to try and educate the public and to alleviate some of their concerns. And so the board is a formal organization, and we're formal too, but I see this group in particular as a place where maybe we could kind of get people on our side, more relaxed, get them the facts so they can figure things out. That was why I brought that up.
Yeah, that sounds like a great, I mean, I agree with your goals completely, but that's not my job to. I mean, again, that's a policy thing, but as far as the ability to conduct your meetings that way, the answer is yes, you could if you as a group decide to do that, and Carol and I can help you set it up.
But back to the poem. The poem is something that would keep the board and staff on track. It would keep them on track as to which task was being done now, what part of it was being done, how much it would cost. The board would be able to be on track too, and you've always got a couple of dozen questions from Stan Matora about the finances. It's a perfect way to keep track of the finances of just where you are on a particular project. And so I would urge our board to discuss this at the next meeting and perhaps write a letter to the GA board about the necessity of returning to the poem.
Chairman, this is Wes Katzenstein. Go ahead, Wes. Yeah, I had a couple of comments. First of all, it might make sense to discuss a bit kind of what our charter or our role is now. It seems originally we were tasked to be a conduit to the public, but yet it occurred to me that we could really not speak for the GA. And then we were trying to bring comments back to the GA, but we weren't allowed to vote. We were supposed to achieve consensus. What I think I hear you saying now, and I think I like it, but we need to hear this, I think now our role is maybe to bring a family of ideas to the GA so that we get points of view, not a consensus necessarily, but kind of the family of ideas or concepts that we feel that the GA should hear. And of course, that's where it's particularly important that the chairman do a good job with his notes, with his report, which he did certainly in the past. So anyway, and then that's how we could perhaps engage the public. If our job is to work on the ideas that should be placed on the table, and in fact, those could come from the public as well. And if we're not necessarily required to obtain consensus, do it where we can. Those would be very strong things in the areas we can achieve consensus. So I guess my question is, what is our role right now? Have I summarized it, or please let me know. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just comment.
Is that a question for me?
Oh, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think he was asking you that question, Keith.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, and I'm afraid it may have to be my last one because we have reached 6 o'clock. But the role you have now remains the same as the role you had before. Obviously, there's a difference, which is whereas before you guys were looking at pieces of the GSP and giving us comment on the GSP so that we could refine it. Now, instead of looking at pieces of the GSP, you're going to be looking at discrete policy decisions or policy documents, and you've got some examples of those that we're discussing right now. More broadly speaking, your role is, when you get to the heart of it, your role is you guys are what they call the stakeholders, right? Everybody's here because you have you represent a cohort that has a unique and important interest when it comes to groundwater production in the valley. And so you are there to be kind of the sounding board. I don't want to say that you're the public relations side of the GA. The GA is responsible for its own public relations, and you're really not responsible for that in that sense. But what we do expect you to do, and what you're here to do, is provide what you think is an opinion that represents the opinion of your cohort, so that it gets added in the mix and considered by the board. Obviously, that doesn't mean that the board ultimately is going to do everything the PAC says, but what the PAC says is important to the board, and they need to consider it. And so, is that a clear enough answer?
I think I heard you say kind of what I had suggested, that we're not necessarily to achieve consensus. We should where we can, but we're supposed to bring ideas to the table from the folks we represent.
Just that, yes.
And Keith, if I can interject one thing before you leave, thanks for that response. And to West, appreciate the compliment. That is, I exactly did try to capture when we couldn't reach consensus because it was very contentious, though what you referred to as a family of ideas. Keith, I would like to ask you to perhaps help us at a future meeting clarify in the bylaws where it says the PAC is not to get involved in issues surrounding the implementation authorities, and I'm not using the right word, senior moment, have an aphasia, and penalties for compliance. I think the word's compliance with regards to activities in the GSP or others. If you could clarify that a little more tightly for us as to what we can and can't consider in our family of ideas on each item as we go forward.
That's correct. I mean, you guys are stakeholders and interested parties, and so if we do have some kind of enforcement action, as we do, in fact, then there's due process issues that have to be taken into consideration. And I can speak more on that at a later time, unless there's another pressing question that I think I need to move on. That's okay.
Thank you very much, Keith.
All right. Thanks a lot, folks. Good meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lon.
Okay, I was just going to, about the poem. It seems like we do need something, because the last year and a half, all we see is the agenda for the GA, and something pops up on the agenda, they're going to review something or approve something, and it's like, where did that come from? We never saw that coming. And like the last time when the shallow well mitigation thing showed up, my first thought was, wow, didn't the board approve that in March? And this is July? What is this? What's going on? Now, if we had a program with some kind of schedule on it that showed what's coming, when it has to be done, how much is this costing, all that sort of thing, it would be real easy for all of us to track what the GA is doing, and Stetson. But right now, there's nothing. Just projects show up, and they're either talked about or maybe approved, maybe not, maybe stretched out. We don't know, because there is no schedule.
Well, the good thing is with the reestablishment of the full public engagement of this committee and full assembly of it is we have the opportunity for increased interface with the staff and setting up and clarification of what both the staff schedule is, and then when the GSP is confirmed, the implementation and execution of the GSP, which is the stated job of the PAC after following the approval of the GSP. So we have a proposal on the table from Judy that we add those three things for some level of discussion to our list of 5 that we have. That makes 8. Our job here tonight, to get back to the focus, is which 2 or 3 do we want to take on next at the next meeting, realizing we have time limitations.
David, I have here the draft policy on the new temporary short-term use of groundwater supply that the board adopted.
The board didn't adopt any short-term, the GA board?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll hand it down to you.
So what are you proposing?
Well, maybe it's already been covered.
It has not been adopted.
Okay.
There was a draft put out that our attorney, Jim Woods, essentially rewrote. It's still in that form, and it has not been adopted.
Okay. And
Yeah.
this is
Are you talking about the temporary emergency water use provision?
it says draft policy on new short-term close parent uses of groundwater supply.
Yeah, no, Don is correct. It was, I believe it was circulated, but it's been redrafted. I think it's still out for comments. It's not been adopted.
Well, this would certainly be an issue for the policy committee.
Yeah, and that's actually, I think, what we've proposed there with item C on your list.
Oh, okay, this is item number C. Okay, well, in that sense, we've kind of talked about, I'm trying to get back to the focusing on this agenda item, is to prioritize among these 8 items we now have. We said the public engagement plan seemed to be right up there at the top, and obviously if this is in circulation for review, the temporary emergency short-term use of groundwater supply should be sooner than later in our agenda and perhaps at the next meeting. The item number B, which you didn't have in front of you, Carol, is the GA-DRI Basin Model Draft Configuration Management Plan. Is that something that is also near term?
I think it's relatively near term, but I don't really have the schedule. It's something Stetson has been working on, so I will have to get back with you on what they think the schedule is for that item. I don't think it's as pressing as some of the other items, but I will get back to you with a better schedule for it. How's that?
Thank you, Carol. And we've talked about the A, B, and C on here, and we've talked about the new 3 that Judy brought up. The remaining 2 items, D and E, were D is provide recommendations on the IWV GA quote-unquote policy for non-compliant pumpers, new pumping water use for illegal operations, excessive water use, persistent water leaks, verification of de minimis pumping, and other pumping issues to make the GA more effective. That's item number D. E is to provide recommendation on the GA policy for water conservation efforts. Regulatory guidance is currently being provided by the Water District, as Judy mentioned, the City of Ridgecrest, Kern County, and San Bernardino County. Of those 5 items that and these 2 specifically that we haven't talked about yet, it seems to me item E, since the other agencies already have something out there,
that would be an urgent item for us to get to first. Would that make sense, Carol?
Yeah, I think that would be in order. I'd recommend that be higher on the priority list as well. And especially since we see notices from the state that we're potentially going into, more drought measures again, possibly not through the winter, but if we don't see more rainfall throughout the winter months here, we're probably going to see some state mandates as far as drought goes, probably, next year, early next year. So I think this is definitely something that would be a high priority for you to be talking about.
Okay, then what I have divined, that's a bad word. My thoughts are, we have to eat the elephant one bite at a time, or get the alligators closest to the canoe first. In my head, I'm thinking of the 8 items we have. The public and community engagement plan, updating that is got to be in the top 3 that we might tackle at the next meeting. It seems the temporary emergency use waiver is one that might be in the top 3, and the one we just discussed, item number 3. And alongside of that, I would think a POAM/schedule discussion would be appropriate. So that would be my proposal for 4 items for comment from the board members to comment on, that we would tackle at the next meeting.
If you're going to do that, I believe that part of your report needs to be a formal request from the GA board as to a critique of the public policy and engagement plan that this committee gave to them that they adopted. They need to give us feedback before we spend time on it. Do you understand what I'm saying? This board created that plan. That was their very first action. I was not on the board at the time, but they did. The board adopted it. They're not using it. They need to tell us what they think is wrong with it, what should be added in their opinion, so that if we are going to change it, we can put their changes in there as well.
Okay, so, and if we do that, sequence of time says we won't address this for 2 more meetings.
Why?
Because we would present to them a report that requests an action that they can't take till the next meeting, and they agendize it. What I would suggest is they did follow parts of it. They didn't follow other parts of it. What we might ask them for that on their thoughts where it was weak, and go ahead with our own assessment, having been the group that produced this and observed what communication did and didn't have happen, that we would start that process and then take their inputs into the middle of the process. I wouldn't delay it waiting for them.
Okay.
So that way you get the beauty of, okay, what didn't you guys find useful about this, or why couldn't you carry it out? And our sense of, in hindsight now, where do we think we were less than successful, and what updated things, given all that's transpired in the 2.5 years since then, that and technology changes, how would we go about it? So one of the problems we've always had in this committee was the timeline to get things done, going through this sequential process, and we got that modified at the last GE meeting when they modified the bylaws to allow the general manager and the chair to come up with the agenda items and advance as quickly as possible. And in that same interest of moving as quickly as possible, I would suggest that we adopt Judy's approach on this item in our report out of this meeting and put it on the agenda next time to begin our review of it. Am I clear on that?
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody agree?
I think I agree with that, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to know, Are you saying that we're going to put the in communication and engagement plan on for the next agenda?
Yeah, I'm proposing, I propose that the next agenda be those 4 items that we talked about, and we'll keep all these on the list, and we'll be adding to this and choosing, hopefully we can see how much we can handle in one meeting and be productive, and we'll see each time we peel down this list, especially given a schedule, which we may have subsequent to this. I'm just saying it's a method of prioritizing the time that we have and the effective use of it.
Okay, I just need some clarification. Number one, are we going to cover more than one of these topics per meeting? Because I don't know. I don't know if we're going to be able to do more than one at a time.
That's a good question for this board. I just made an assumption that we might, at this next meeting, tackle 4 items and at least at the top level see where we get.
You will give us written documents to review?
Well, we will have them on items 1 and 3. We already have those out. You already have item number 1 available to you. Item number 3 is this document, item C. That would be our second item. Item number 3, Carol, do we have any draft documents on the policy for water conservation efforts? Our item number E, other than...
I think we do have some information, and I'll make sure that we get it to you.
Okay, great. And then the open discussion about the poem is a further discussion of what we were having about with Judy. It doesn't require any documentation.
Right. Right.
So, and that may be a lot to bite off for the first meeting. But we can see where we get. I think we're all sitting here looking at these and chomping at the bit to get into them after 20 months. And yet we know how these meetings can be when we get into the details on review items. But I think in particular on items where we have documents like A and C, we can get through those pretty quick. If you do your individual review ahead of time and walk in here and be ready to make comments on it, those can go quickly. Item E and F may take longer. And
well,
then...
You already said that we could start on item 1, and then we'll have to wait to see what the board comes back with before we finish it off anyway.
Yep.
Right.
But I'm trying to get my arms around and get the committees kind of, I think we can do it or we can't. We're biting off too much chunk of how we go after this elephant.
Well, we try, and if we don't get there, we don't get there.
Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the floor.
You got it.
I'm confused on the conservation and the emergency short-term use. Back on May 28th, I submitted written comments as requested to Johnson, Helsley, and Steele. Carbon copied April. On June 7, I sent my comments in on short-term use, and these are published on the GA website under PAC comments. And I haven't seen or heard or been replied to, not that I expected it, on either of these two, but we've been there, done that from my perspective, and it's coming up again, so I'm confused as to why this would be amongst those things being suggested for the next meeting. But let me continue. I do strongly agree with the communication and engagement priority, your 8A. I represent 30,000 constituents, ratepayers, and I still get regular comments. Do we have a water problem here in the valley? They really don't have a clue. I'm guessing 90% of them have no understanding of what we've been through or where we've been for the last 5 years. And it came out in spades with the replenishment fee. They got their bill, and there it is detailed out, and they were shocked and they were unhappy. So I'm agreeing that communication and engagement should be our top priority. And it's probably going to take, I'm going to guess, several meetings to do that one item and get it right. Because in my estimation, we have not gotten it right. Keith hit on the idea that we are in limbo right now. We've got an adjudication process. We have multiple lawsuits. We have the Department of Water Resources offering to intervene, if you will, or assist in reconciling differences between the different parties. We have yet to hear from the DWR, and by law they must reply to our plan by the end of January. They've received 26 comments, most of them expressing significant concerns with the GSP. One of those concerns expressed multiple times is there is no backup to importing. And from my view, no matter where we come down on the lawsuits, very significant with Searles, with Mojave, where we come down on adjudication or where, and where DWR will come down on our plan, I see three broad areas that impact communication and engagement. They could approve our plan as is, but I doubt it. I don't think it complies for a number of reasons, some big, some small. So I'm expecting the possibility of an approval, but with contingencies that are very significant and that have to be satisfied within 180 days under the law, or they won't even give us the opportunity to attempt to satisfy those. And they will provide, if they do that, opportunities for the PAC to address new and significant issues that we haven't even addressed or thought about to date. One of those possibilities is that they will not allow us to assume that someone else is going to pay for our import infrastructure. Okay? I think that's a very real possibility that they're going to say it's not realistic. In fact, they anticipate that in the letter we just got. Realistic expectations of future water supplies is critical to successful implementation of this landmark law. I think they may be thinking about us, but I'm not sure. But I see approval as is, or approval, but not, you must have a backup plan that relies solely on the water you have to back up importing. Or another possibility is they approve the plan and we cannot come up with the money. Each one of those three alternatives, in my opinion, needs to be addressed so that the public can understand the consequences of each of those scenarios to themselves. Our communication and engagement plan calls for exactly that. In the executive summary, each stakeholder and agency must have an opportunity to understand the magnitude of the groundwater overdraft problem and how the problem could affect the stakeholder. My stakeholders don't have a clue. You go over to the objectives session of the communication engagement plan, the last item. Clear explanations of how the plan could affect all uses and users of groundwater in the basin. These three options can be neatly summarized on a schedule, and you can put dollars to them, and you can relate those dollars to the monthly bill. Mine just came today. It has the HCF listed right there. I know exactly how many hundreds of cubic feet I used last month, and I know what it costs per 100 cubic feet, and it ties right into my bill. It's not that difficult, but it's painful. Very painful to communicate these things because we're talking about reducing groundwater pumping from 28,000 to 7,000 unless we can figure out a way to get it into the ground. So that's a long-winded, and I apologize for that. But I do believe that communication and engagement is critical. If the GA didn't like the blowback on the replenishment fee, wait until they see what's going to happen to them when they have to pay for infrastructure. Or even worse, we don't import at all, and we have to live with what we have. Those things can and should be communicated, in my opinion, sooner rather than later, and even before the DWR rules. That's why I'm thinking our next meeting or two can well be devoted to just communication, what the public needs to know, when they need to know it, to prepare them. Now, if that sounds terrible, and if I was promoting importing, and I like the idea, although I'm extremely skeptical, as most of you know, one of the best tools is to make sure the public understands the consequences if we can't. That might get them off their duff. That might get them thinking, well, maybe I can afford to raise and pay more. I don't know, but it's a two-way street. All I'm doing is trying to make a case. We could spend a lot of time on communication and engagement and help bring the community up.
Are you suggesting that updating the communication plan is not just the plan for how the GA would go about that and perhaps suggesting the areas that they should do it, but what I thought I heard you saying is we should discuss exactly the implementation of those ideas in here as part of your plan, or that's what I thought I heard.
Well, in my own words, I'm talking about managing expectations, okay? And giving people reason to support importing, a reason to pay the fee. If we really think we have a reasonable shot at getting the federal government or the state or the county to pay for our infrastructure, because that's what this plan is about. It says right in there it's going to take public funds. We can't afford it. So it's managing expectations so that we don't get a repeat if things do start to fall apart. They at least know, okay, this could be coming. This could be coming. And this is what it means to us. So it's just, to me, a part of communication. So we're just telling them, it is theoretical. I'm not giving the answer to what it is. Who's going to get the $7,500? I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying
you're suggesting methods to communicate those issues to them.
Yes.
And that I agree is with the plan.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And you were adding the needed emphasis as to why it was so important that we have, and they have, the GA has a method and multiple methods to try to ensure that people get that information.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, I like to echo the importance of the comments Mr. Panzer just made, but I think what I hear is saying, I hope I hear is saying, we're not going to go back and rewrite that document. That was a tedious job. If Lorelei hadn't showed up, we'd probably still be doing it. If you're still there, Lorelei, thank you. And I think that document has everything for all people in it. I think any communication scheme you could manage, you could imagine, I expect is described in there. So I'm hoping that we're talking about providing more focus to the communication that's happening, as was just suggested, rather than strapping that thing back on our back and dragging it around and trying to rewrite that thing. I think anything we want to do is already in it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with West Katzenstein. I just want to say there's some minor updating of contact lists, et cetera, that needs to be updated in there.
I would agree with all those comments, and I think we're not. I didn't see this as a rewrite. I saw it as, given the 2 years of experience we've had with it, the things that have worked, have not worked, the public that has not taken some opportunities and not gotten, and we've not gotten to them in other ways, that it's an update is required, and perhaps an emphasis, as you both suggested, on which items need to be tackled with the most focus. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying that we need to have a more effective communications and outreach, period, and anything we choose to do is probably already covered in that extensive document that we wrote already. So I would think we should focus more on how we effectively communicate and engage, or how the GA does, and maybe not so much rewriting that document, although if there are some contacts that need to be rewritten, I could certainly agree with that.
Okay, so what I hear so far in the discussion is the group is the committee has pretty much agreed that the priority item for our next meeting is redoing that community, or taking a look at and reinforcing both in areas of focus and methods, the communications plan. Okay. Is that agreed?
I agree with that, yeah.
Okay.
And I agree with that. I'm not proposing a rewrite. I liked the communication engagement plan. I don't like the way we executed it.
I did too.
As Wes says, we have all the tools we need here. We need to execute them very effectively, and we need to get moving now.
Okay, and the second item that was up for proposal was, since we have this out, and we have other entities that are now starting to get around the edges of this, that we take on the item number C as priority number 2, draft ordinance on temporary emergency well water use and waiver of assessments. Is that something we'd agree on?
Well, I don't know. Could we get some input from Carol, the general manager for the GA? Is number E, or letter E, the more urgent? Because I'm worried there. I've been seeing press releases in the newspaper about the state could declare some kind of order where everybody's going to have to reduce by a certain percentage, like in the next 2 months. That could happen. Maybe we should do E first.
Carol, do you have thoughts on that?
I unfortunately could not hear much of what she said. Could you repeat? Speak into the microphone.
Yeah. What I want to say is, could letter E be more urgent, because there have been press releases put in the newspapers, et cetera, regarding that our state of California could declare like an emergency cutback. Everybody's got to cut back by a certain percentage of water use. They said they might do a blanket order like that, possibly in the next month or two.
I'm not sure that we're going to see it now, this late in the season. Typically, it takes time. You know, most of water conservation is achieved in the warmer months, because that's when people tend to use more water, outdoor water use particularly, and so now we're starting to roll out of summer and into fall. It's more likely we're not going to see those mandatory cutbacks right now. We're going to see voluntary reduction requests. I think that's what we're seeing right now, 15% voluntary reduction requests. So I don't think there's a really urgent need. I do think it's something that you want to be looking at within the next couple of months, so that we can be prepared as we go into the new year particularly. But I don't think that there's a real urgent need to look at it right away next month, or at least I don't think it takes precedence necessarily over, for instance, the temporary or emergency water use. That's something that the GA board's going to be looking at pretty soon. I think the TAC is also going to be looking at it, and so I would love to see you folks take a look at that policy and provide us with your comments next time you meet.
Does that answer your question, Renee?
So then we would do E next.
Well, what I hear Carol recommending is that we do C next, and that number 3 would be E. And then we can have the POEM discussion. A good portion of the POEM discussion is going to be delivered in our report to the GA. And so that discussion might be dependent on the response to the PAC report on the subject. So I think that's a doable goal, those 4 items. We may not get all the way through them, but I think it's a doable aspiration for us to tackle as a group when we get back together 4 weeks, 5 weeks from now.
If I might?
Yes, Don, please.
I was just going to comment on the conservation item, just to shed a little light on it. Of course, the governor's looking at, has asked for 15% voluntary conservation compared to last year, and has indicated that he would consider mandatory conservation. At the time was 6 weeks, I think it's now 5 weeks, which is coincidentally after the recall election. So I've been active on some committees with the Association of California Water Agency on water use efficiency, and I've expressed to them concern about taking that approach to blanket mandatory conservation because, comparing to last year, because after the last drought, when mandatory conservation restrictions were put into effect, after the drought was over, many water districts went back to their old habits and didn't keep restrictions in place. I think everybody here that's residents knows the water district has kept those restrictions in place, and our board adopted a voluntary 20% conservation target compared to 2013, which is the year the state uses for baseline. And we've achieved 22.7% since 2016. So the point I'm saying is to have us compare or to put a mandatory conservation target on us comparing to last year when we've been conserving all along, to me that is very unfair. I can see that, the districts that did the prudent thing and kept restrictions in place are going to be penalized for doing so. And so, again, I've expressed that to Aqua, and I think Aqua is aware of that. Whether or not the governor and the state board takes that feedback to heart remains to be seen, but I think we have a legitimate point to make that we've done what we've needed to do over the last few years, and to put another mandatory target on us at this point in time comparing to last year, it would be unfair.
So are you suggesting we alter our sequence or confirming that we should? I mean, you're addressing an issue should, E down there happen, as Renee suggested earlier this year, and arguments against it, which, by the way, are consistent with the way bureaucracies behave. No good deed shall go unpunished. What did you do for me today?
Yeah. Well, my understanding of this agenda item, and maybe I'm wrong, and Kel can correct me, but I think this was looking at pretty much, there was actually a policy put out that mirrored the district's ordinance 103, changed a little bit of the wording, but I think that's what this was referring to, is that the groundwater authority would adopt, for lack of a better word, an ordinance mirroring what the city and the water district already has. GA staff has discussed this topic, and my sense coming out of that discussion was that it's not really needed because, for one, the water district has an ordinance which we enforce. We have the resources to reinforce, and we have been reinforcing it. And the water district is required by the State Water Board to report the results every month. So, in a sense, it'd be redundant, and I don't know that the Groundwater Authority even has the resources to send somebody out to be patrolling the valley and reporting water waste, if you will. The county council, during a staff call, mentioned that the county already has an ordinance. So, point being, the area is already covered. The city mirrors the district's ordinance, but they don't, they rely on the district to enforce it, which is fine. We accept that and we do that. So how many layers do you need? How many times are you going to find the same person? The city's going to find them, the water district's going to find them, the groundwater authority is going to find them.
Well, as I understand it, having seen this just now, is this policy covers other than the water district, and so it's applicable to them. And I'm trying to get to, are you recommending we don't even consider?
Well, I think we need to maybe ask to either the staff, legal counsel, or board, is this something that really should be on the list? Because based on discussions we've had in the staff calls, my sense coming out of that is that there's not a need for this because the district covers our service area, and the county has an ordinance that covers outside of the district area.
How about if, Carol, did you want to chime in?
Let me just comment there, and Don, you can refresh my memory too, but my recollection was this came about as a discussion to have a policy to encourage pumpers basically to use best water conservation practices to fix leaks in a timely manner. I think it arose when there was a particular system that had a leak, a break that was left unattended for quite some time. So we wanted to encourage pumpers to not waste water. So not necessarily at the retail level, but at the level of those that report to the GA.
So again, my recollection was as a result of that discussion, a document was produced that, again, mirrored the district's ordinance 103, which includes actions such as discouraging or prohibiting washing down driveways, watering during certain hours, those sorts of things. And again,
I think it did.
Yeah.
I think it did incorporate this. Many of the state and local water use restrictions. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think based on the staff discussion that we had was that, and I remember County Council again, his opinion was that there was no need for this because the county had an ordinance in place, the water district had an ordinance in place, and the city had an ordinance in place. So again, and then the question comes to mind, if the groundwater authority adopts something like this, how are they going to enforce it? You have nobody here other than April to drive around in her car and find these, unless you're counting on people to report. But again, the district has the resources. We've been doing this. We're the ones that are required to report to the state, water waste and fines and those sorts of things. So again, I think maybe just, Chair, maybe want to just get direction from GA Council, whether or not, maybe there's something more to this than I'm seeing, but based on my understanding of discussions and staff calls, I'm not so sure that this is something.
Okay, let me.
A question of Don. You're talking about item E?
Yes.
The same thing that you said about driving around in a car is applicable to item D. But I did want to ask you a question. When does the law go into effect, the legislation that people are only supposed to use 55 gallons per day?
That's supposed to take, the targets are issued in June of 2022. They don't really take effect until 2020, I could be wrong here, 2024, 25, but the targets are assigned June of 2022.
Thank you.
Okay, let me clarify, make sure I haven't lost the bubble here. You're talking about on the existing agenda, item E, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's the one that we prioritized third. What I would suggest, along with your recommendation in the discussion with Carol, is that we propose the 4 items, or we let them know that this is how we prioritized them. Item number 1, item A, item C, item E, and a POAM discussion. And then we ask for clarification on item number E based on the discussions you have had and direction and issues and Keith, consultation with Keith and Carol and the rest of the staff, that this is what we've decided, but we would defer to an ongoing discussion from the staff with regards to whether that E item is even needed. So then we would know. And if in case that dropped off the agenda, is there something else of our other priority items on here that we would want to consider? If the GA board said, yeah, that you don't need to look at that, do we want to have, okay, the next one up that we would throw in here for our own consideration, our recommendation, what do we want to do next?
I think, from my standpoint, I would like that report on the GSP, on its progress and what's going on with it, because over the last year and a half, we have had things come from Stetson to do for Stetson that keep coming back. And I think they need to give us a report. The board has their PowerPoint presentation every month, but they don't actually ask for what if they had a plan, they wouldn't need it, but they don't ask for a progress report. And I would like to see that. I don't know what the rest of the committee thinks.
I think we got an answer from Keith that there is no progress until we get the approval at this point. Is that what everybody heard?
That's what I heard
That's
too.
what I heard.
But then I have to ask, why are implementation projects continuing to be brought up and acted upon when we don't even know if they're going to be approved?
That's wise planning. You assume the SIGMA gave you the authorization, presuming that this is an urgent need in a critical draft basin to solve it within 40 years, and that there could be up to a 2-year delay when you start once you start with this plan. So you're authorized to begin implementing it immediately upon submission. And so, as a planner and executor for my career, I wouldn't sit on my thumbs for 2 years.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I want to comment a little bit on what Mr. Zadeba had to say. And in a way, he's talking about how we respond to a state mandate. And this is in the state, we have reservoirs going empty, we have a drought condition, and it's right in your face. Depending upon which legal brief you listen to in this basin, we either have lots of water, we have no problem, or we have an ongoing problem. And I think we have an ongoing problem. So we're really, in response to that ongoing problem, the water district's been making changes and making them permanent as far as conservation. And so in a way, we're being asked to react to a situation that's really a little bit different than ours. We have a problem. We're in an ongoing drought. Well, you have an ongoing problem to solve. We're not in like a periodic problem that you see up and down the state as the reservoirs fill or not. And so it's unfortunate we even have to respond to this state mandate. It's almost misplaced on us.
So what do we want to do with if they come back and say item number E, we don't believe, we wouldn't prioritize that as high in order to, we've got a lot on our plate even with just these 8. What else do we want to look at? And I would say my first thought is the configuration management plan for the transfer of the model. And that's the next one up. And we would have the authority anyway, working with Carol, to put that on there if they said item number E isn't necessary for reasons that we have discussed in here. But I'm trying to get an idea of what the committee would like to put in its place next, so it's not just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment on E.
Yes.
Carol, Thomas Kiefer, the general manager, just told us that part of the intent was to encourage pumpers not to waste water. Mr. Deba is mainly talking about water district. What about all the pumpers that are outside the water district? There's those private wells that are, some of them are registered, some of them are non-de minimis, some of them are de minimis. I see that E may pertain to them. So do we really just totally negate E?
No, I think the way I read it and the way Don's comments were about it, and with Carol, were that each of the entities that sit on the GA itself has regulatory authority and is doing so on that item, and that is why the GA itself doesn't need to take action, because each of the 5 bodies that have representation on the groundwater authority itself are doing that separately. In fact, if you think about it, that's the original intent of the joint powers agreement and how they came up with those 5 entities to form the groundwater authority. Is SGMA only gives limited enforcement authorities to the groundwater authority itself, and they couldn't, a GSA, which ours is a groundwater authority in name, but it's a GSA within SGMA, only does not have a lot of the authorities that the water district or the city or the county has. And the idea of having the 5 members of the joint power agreement be to coordinate across those 5 entities in one basin the actions that needed to be done for implementation and enforcement. Did I state that right, Don?
Pretty much. I'm not sure about San Bernardino County and Inyo County's ordinances, but I know Kern County specifically mentioned there's an ordinance in place for conservation. And as you said, the district and the city both have ones that the city mirrored the districts. So again, the area is pretty much covered. And again, I don't know how it would be enforced, among some of the private pumpers out in the county area. But again, there's a county ordinance that is in place, and I guess it's up to them to enforce it.
What I would suggest is that when I bring this to them as an item that if we agree that this is number 3 on our priority, that we highlight that issue, and therefore we would ask essentially we'd be presenting to the board a staff discussion that we heard 2 members of the staff talk about here with regards to this was under consideration and the implications that were brought forward by what the state might do, et cetera, and allow that, and that would expose this to the directors, and then they could suggest whether we leave it on or substitute some other, use our time on a different item. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does to me.
I just want to say one more thing about it's the groundwater authority that's gone to this, the trouble of getting so many wells registered with the groundwater authority. And is the county in on those same wells, monitoring them to make sure they don't waste water, even though they have a ordinance in place? Because that's been one of the big things, is to get all these private wells registered, and I figured E pertains to that.
Lorelei, do you have an answer for that?
She's going to have to repeat it. She was going in and out.
The private wells that the GA has gotten registered, whether they're de minimis or non-de minimis wells, wouldn't letter E pertain on the agenda under 8 pertain to them, and that's where the GA needs to intervene here, and maybe E is important as far as the newly registered wells within the last 2 years with the GA.
So I've listened to all these comments, and I was integral in putting together the ordinance for the county. So I think what's happening here is there's a collapse between the powers of the GSA and the powers of the individual agencies. The PAC is responsible for advising the GSA, not the individual agencies. And so the registration of those wells and the management of that is under the GSA. It's not under the county. It's not under the water districts. So I think the issue of E, where you're going to review all the other ordinances, is I just agree with Don. We have an ordinance, and it addresses new development. It addresses, how, you're not supposed to put in new turf. You're not supposed to do all these other things. But for the county to go further than that, we're going to be mandating how many trees you can put in your backyard of your single-family home on a 2.5-acre parcel. And I can tell you that the county is not interested in going there right now. So I'm not clear that this is a useful work for the PAC when you have all these other more important issues on this agenda. And Dave, with all due respect, the list you already have is going to take more than one meeting. I don't think you need any more items on this list.
Other than the three?
Correct. I think the third one, verification of de minimis pumping, excessive water use, I think that's going to take 2 or 3 meetings to get through, just based on how smart everybody at this table is, but how complicated these issues are. So I think E should be taken off the table, because unless you want to compress it down to GSA issues of water conservation only.
Oh, we didn't have item number D. Of these, we had prioritized 4 items for the next meeting. A, C,
No,
E.
I'm talking about, I think those are too many for one meeting, is what I'm saying.
Well, what you mentioned, verification of pumping wasn't one of those that we were going to do next time.
No, you've missed my point. We were talking about E.
Right.
She asked me a question. I said that is not a county process on the private wells. That's a GSA authority. And I'm just commenting that I don't think E is even necessary when you talk about reviewing all of this regulatory guidance. I don't think that's necessary. I was just responding to her question.
Yeah, I got confused when you mentioned D, because that wasn't one of the ones we had considered yet. So that was
well,
my...
I know, but you had also asked, what else should we put on the list? I'm just saying, I think the list is fine, and you should take E off. I think you have enough on this list to figure out the next... You have enough on this list to get us through February.
With just the 3 items.
Yes, because
okay, that was my question. I didn't phrase it properly. We were only, if the consideration was, if we took 3 off the list in consultation with the GA, what did we want to add in its place? And you're suggesting we've got too much to handle as it is with just the 3 items. Out of the 8, just those 3 items is enough. And I hear agreement from Pat. Do we have agreement from the other folks in here?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes, I definitely would agree. I think we're going on 2 hours and really haven't had anything on this agenda that's very substantive.
I agree. But we're getting used to each other again. Okay, well, interestingly enough, part of the method in my madness was to see how much we wanted to take on. So I tend to agree with you. I would stick with those 3 that we have talked about. Do we even want to bring that item E to them, or do we want to consider that we've...
Carol may chime in, but I think probably clarification is needed. I would go ahead and get clarification on that, whether or not it's something they want the PAC to consider.
Okay, then we'll go with the plan that we had. My plan, I proposed to the group, is to go with what we had originally said we were going to prioritize: A, C, E, and the new POAM discussion. And if they eliminate, and have this discussion, and if they recommend eliminating E, we do not add something in its place.
Right.
Okay, and then we'll given that that's what we'll tackle next time, we'll have discussions at the end of that meeting about how to prioritize what else is on our plate, and we'll get used to operating again together. Any more discussion on the prioritization for the next meeting topics?
No, but I have a comment. My comment is, in looking at all of these various issues we will be looking at, we must never forget common sense.
Common sense
what
is
I'm
off.
talking about.
Yep, common sense is in short supply in some areas of our world currently. Thank you, Judy. Any other comments on this item? Okay, any public comments? Don?
I think my microphone is working. Don Decker, I'm a member of the PAC, and the configuration management task is quite technical, and there isn't a whole lot there that I think that your committee would probably find something they could actually get a hold of, if you will. I'll give you a copy of my report that I sent in as a TAC member, and it'll give you some idea of what the content is. I'd like to recommend that you move the POAM topic area that you've got on your list, move that forward as expeditiously as your committee can do, because it's fundamental to everything that's happening. That simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Oh, one last thing. I'd like to give your committee and yourself the congratulations for really working hard on the topic of this evening. It goes on, but everything you talked about is important aspects of the topics discussed. There's no wasted time.
Thank you, Don, and we appreciate that. Okay, seeing no further public comment, item number 9, confirm our next regular meeting, September the 23rd, 2021. That is, in fact, fourth Thursday, and it will be at 5 p.m. Right here in the council chambers, conducted in similar fashion. Any member comments? Anything from the public? Seeing none, we'll go around the room for individual member closing comments. Let's start with Nick.
Okay. When Lyle Fisher walked into the room this evening, he brought to mind Mark Twain. Rumors of my demise are greatly exaggerated. It's great to see you, Lyle.
Good to see you, too.
I appreciate Nick's comments he made just a little while ago about the ignorance of people and what they don't understand, and we need to make sure that they get the proper message. And it's good to be back and to see all your sweet, smiling faces.
I was going to echo that, too. It was good to be back and kind of trying to do something good again. And I'll defer back to like the last board meeting when I stood up and said public comment, I think at the first of it, about the public not knowing what's going on. You know, those people that stood up and spoke was just absolutely breathtaking. Obviously, none of them knew anything about what was going on, what's been going on, anything. And I thought, that's when I thought, and I hadn't seen the agenda, that I says, we need to look at that communications plan and hit the board right between the eyes with it, because obviously nothing's going on, you know, because no one gets the word. But then again, we have this problem too, you know, being a domestic well owner. You know, I built my house kind of in the middle of 5 acres out here. I also have 5 acres on each side of it as a buffer. I live out there for a reason. I don't want people messing with me. Got it? Well, so there's a lot of people out there who are far worse than me, because here I am right in the middle of it, right? You know, and sometimes I get really tired of this too. But there are people that are much worse than that, and trying to get word to them, there's the challenge. It's not, you know, you can't make them read, you can't make them come to meetings, you can't force them to understand what it is they're reading or what's going on. And I won't go on any further, but that's the way it is. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Don?
Nothing, thank you.
John? We're training ourselves on the new system tonight. And like me, some of you are struggling. Pat?
I'm not going to try to use that. I'll just talk loud. I understand the communication problem, and I understand what Lyle is saying. You can lead the horse to water, so to speak, but you cannot make it drink. And we have a valley full of people just like that. So they'll believe whatever they want, no matter what you do. So forget it. You can give them all the information you want.
Thank you, Ed.
If at first you don't succeed, try again.
Agreed. We're getting a lot of wisdom here from our commenters.
We've had 20 months to think about it. Yeah.
Well, that considered, if that's all we came up with. West.
Yeah, good to see you all again. Glad you're all healthy. And another part, I don't know if it's part of the communications, but you have folks that just don't contribute anything to finding a solution. They haven't taken the time to inform themselves on the nature of the problem, the laws we're dealing with, the limitations that are placed on us. And it's particularly discouraging to me when these folks keep coming back and don't offer anything useful. So perhaps we can do something about that. Anyway, good seeing everybody.
Renee?
Yeah. I want to say thank you for having the PAC meeting in person, and it's good to be back and see everybody. I just wanted to bring to the attention of the members, the fourth Thursday in November is Thanksgiving Day, and the fourth Thursday in December is the day before the holiday season in December starts.
So we'll have to adjust the dates.
Right.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, in my closing comments, I'd
You
like...
forgot someone.
Lorelei, thank you for pointing that out. How can I miss
Thank
Lorelei? You're still on the screen, so I had you over there, but I'm reverting to my in-person repertoire. Go ahead,
I promise
Lorelei.
to be in person next time. So first of all, I just wanted to be happy to see that you're all well and you're here, but I also wanted to say once again how much I appreciate all of you. You're all volunteers. You've been working many years for this community, and it's good to be back in the trenches of trying to, work out these issues, but more importantly, how do we continue to reach out to the community members whose lives are tied up in their lands and their homes, and they're really just trying to understand what's going on. So I look forward to seeing you all in person next month.
Thank you, Lorelei. I would very much like to echo Lorelei's comments on seeing everybody again and the volunteer nature of this group. Even those of you that are here in a semi-official capacity, I know that this is your time still that you're taking away from it to do this. And this isn't really part of your remuneration for doing that. And it's, I consider it part of the community service that everybody up here is doing. On the communication subject, the lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I've been in a number of organizations and am currently in a number of organizations where this is a universal challenge. It's interesting, the more mature members of this group grew up in an age where there were only a few limited sources that everybody accessed. That world doesn't exist. There are no common reference points that a youngster growing up today, or touchstone that a youngster would grow up today on pop culture, or and use of newspapers, or in this town the swap sheet, or the Rocketeer on the base, or the only 3 networks, and so it was so much easier to get information out to the public in decades past. We've advanced so far in technology that we've so widely distributed the opportunity to individually target demographics that we've made it much harder to get out really important stuff unless the people really want to hear it. And one of the things that drove that home to me is, and I'm just having a senior moment, is a statement that was made during the testimony in the GA, or I think it was a year ago or so, about I didn't know what was going on, and the only thing I got was this thing in the mail that I threw away because I thought it was junk mail. And that was the only way that person, they were in Lyle's group, and no offense, Lyle, and many people in this valley, me included, love that lifestyle. And the one chance you had to communicate them, they threw away. I'll add on top of that is something interesting. I was looking at the requirements for citizenship the other day, and the test that they give newly wanting to be U.S. citizens, and they define for them the duties of citizenship which come with the privileges of living in this country. And one of them that they're required to know, and I didn't know that as a citizen because I was born here, but I've lived it without knowing it, was to be informed on local issues in your community and expand that to the country. That is listed to folks that want to achieve citizenship as a duty of citizenship. So I think it's really worthwhile that we try as hard as we can to put and consider all the effort we can and focus into the efforts next time. But we also got to recognize that for all of our folks in the country, and maybe spread this among the people we know, hey, you have a duty to want to be informed and to be a part of the community. In closing, I was really happy to see everybody tonight. I wasn't sure we were going to get everybody back, especially in person. Thank you for those that are here that were maybe a little bit uncomfortable with it. I'm optimistic about where we're going and the collaboration we're going to have, especially seeing the opportunity to get out in front of draft policies and input our thoughts before they're drafted. That's a first for this committee in 3 years, and I'm really enthusiastic. Thanks, and with that, we'll adjourn.